or I'll say good day once again, and let us continue. Before we begin with the next segment of this transmissional information, does anyone have any questions or require any clarifications on what has already been discussed, specifically with regard to the chart or any other information we have brought about to this point? Yes. All right, you and you. We want to make sure that before we continue, you all have as clear an understanding of the information that has been delivered as possible, so that you can utilize it as strongly as is possible.
Hi, Bashar.
And you, good day.
Thank you.
My question relates to what you talked about earlier about the destruction of Mars.
Yes.
And the quarantine. And I was wondering what actually caused the destruction of Mars.
Asteroidal impact.
Oh, it actually hit the planet.
In this sense, you will find there were, first of all, a very, very close flyby that removed most of the atmosphere, followed by asteroidal impacts once the atmospheric envelope and buffer was removed. Thus then also dispelling most of the water into space, leaving behind some that was locked into the soil.
Okay. Thank you.
Nice.
The next one was, what was the purpose of the quarantine? Why are we being quarantined?
Well, as we have euphemistically said before, would you want to land in an insane asylum where all the inmates had weapons? Now, in some ways, of course, I am being a little bit facetious. But not much. However, to answer your question in a more straightforward manner, once it was recognized that an imbalance had occurred in the energy for a variety of reasons, and we will not go into that exactly right now, but once the imbalance had occurred on planet Earth for a variety of reasons, in a sense, it was thought best to see what would happen, to leave it alone and see if it would repair and recover and rebalance on its own. For in that sense, it was recognized that because to some degree, some aspect of involvement or interference had to some degree been responsible for bringing about the imbalance, it was thought that leaving things alone may help it rebalance rather than attempting to intervene again. You follow me?
Yes.
Does that answer your question sufficiently?
It does. How long ago did this quarantine start in our counting of time?
Well, it has actually been around for thousands of years, primarily in and around your year of about 11,500 BC, as you say.
I see.
During the Atlantean destruction. But it was leaky, in a sense, for a while. In other words, there were contacts during and after that time, but became very solid as a quarantine, more solid, in and around what you would call about 6,000 of your years ago to the present day, or roughly to the present day, in that it began to be somewhat lifted in what you call your early 20th century. As we began to notice where you were going, what you were doing, that you were now developing technologies and awarenesses that would reconnect you to the stars, that you were developing technologies that had the capability of destroying your world, then did we recognize that we had an opportunity not to lift the quarantine, but to very gently and carefully peel back the layer that would begin careful dialogues, once again, to see whether or not you would be capable of a civilization of coming to a point still now where the quarantine could be lifted and Now we are saying that it can be. The idea of 2012 being recognized by your Mayan civilization and other civilizations indigenously on your planet as being the end of a quarantine date was an indicator and a marker that was hoped, if planted into the collective consciousness of your society, would act surreptitiously and gently and carefully to bring you back about to the point where it truly could be lifted. And we are now capable of recognizing that, in fact, it will be lifted. Does that help?
Yes, it does. By the way, you started off by asking if I would want to land in the middle of an insane asylum where all the inmates had weapons, and I guess I would because I did. I'm here, so...
Yes. And the fact that you were willing to do that says a lot about why the rest of us stayed away. And again, you know, I am joking.
Of course. But there's a kernel of truth in it, too.
Yes, there is.
Yes.
There is even a general of truth in it. Well, now you see, we didn't have puns in our society till we learned them from you.
There you go.
So, serves you right.
Thank you, Bashar. It's very good seeing you again.
And you as well. And the next person who requires clarification on material already given.
That was basically the question I had, was about the quarantine.
Yes.
So
you are clarified and we can move on, or is there something else you wish to say?
if you could clarify a little bit more about the experiment of choosing to be in the dark and moving to the light and the power of that. I was really reacting in my emotional body when you were talking about that.
Yes. Well, as we say, it is a very bold thing to do, to recognize that you could actually have an experience within creation where you wouldn't even recall that you were choosing that experience. In other words, I'll put it in your euphemistic language. It's like saying that the strongest hell is the one you don't even know you're in. And yet you chose to create that idea that you would anchor yourself so deeply into the negative vibration of the dark side of energy that you wouldn't even necessarily know you had chosen to be there, and thus could not know you could choose to be out of it. But knowing that that experience would be so deep, that it would enrich you in ways that no other experience on any other level could, you decided to be a part of that self-chosen experiment to add to the overall complexity and richness of how all that is can experience itself. Do you follow?
Yes.
Does that help, or is there something else you wish to
That does
illuminate?
help. With the experiment, it sounds like I'm getting that we needed a little help.
In what sense?
To bring ourselves out of the darkness into the light.
Well, yes, and the idea is to show you and illustrate to you, and to have you illustrate to yourself, that no matter how dark things get, there is always a little light in the dark. Always. And through that little bit of light, through that little light window, help can always come. This is what is actually meant by the symbol that you call on your planet the yin-yang symbol, where you have the dark side and the light side, but each side also has a little circle of dark or light in it, in opposition. So the light always contains a little bit of the potential of the dark always contains a little bit of potential of the light, and so no matter what side you choose, you are never completely without capability of accessing the other side. You see?
So even in quarantine, we were getting a little assistance, say, from other aspects of ourselves to help us in the right direction.
Dreams. And remember that the quarantine has nothing at all to do with your capability of leaving your bodies. So in astral projection and in communicating in other dimensions and other levels while you are asleep, you created a lot of connections and a lot of contacts and a lot of dialogues and a lot of assistance and did a lot of the planning as to what was going on Earth. So you were engineering it all the way. But when you reconnected to the idea of the dark dream, part of the definition of the dark dream was to forget that you had been doing that. You follow?
Yes.
But not now. Now part of the idea is the waking up from the dark dream. So in the definition of waking up from the dark dream, you can now recall and recognize and connect to the idea consciously that you have assistance. And that's why dialogues such as these can take place, and why you can start recalling more and more dream encounters with us and other beings in spirit and other dimensions of existence, and be more in touch with other levels of your own consciousness, and see more how you yourselves are engineering this particular experience, so that you recognize you always had a choice and still do. Make sense?
Yes.
Does that help?
That helps.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bashar.
Are any other clarifications required? Oh, all right, all right, all right. 1, 2, 3.
This is the third one. Hi, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
My question to you is regards, I am at the house with my mother. I'm the caregiver, meaning that there's 3 of us. There is my mother, myself, my other sister. We are in a 3.
All right.
My question to you, in the blueprint that you have given us here,
Yes.
does the dynamics between the mother and the child, is there something in this diagram that I can look at? Because she's so in the dark, her dark dream,
Yes.
that it, and is closely tied to mine, that I can't unhook her, so I find myself energetically really low and unable.
All right.
So
We will
got-
be discussing some of this particular aspect of the dynamic also in tomorrow's transmission. For if you look ahead on the charts that you have been given, you will see that there is one that has 4 quadrants and talks about the idea of the oversoul and the soul and the all that is,
Oh, okay.
and the different quadrants. And this has more to do with one of those quadrants in terms of forming family groups.
Excellent.
You follow me?
That's
So
good.
we will address this idea a little bit more deeply in that transmission as well.
Okay. I was jumping ahead, wasn't I?
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's all right.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And other clarifications?
Another clarification. Hello, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
Thanks for bringing your A game today here.
A game. All right.
Your best. I have a question or comments about prior communication, the power of illusion,
Yes.
the illusion of power.
Yes.
I think that's an incredibly dynamic polarity, and I
Yes.
just want to explore it.
Yes.
How about if I give you an example in my own reference of how I might approach a situation,
By all means.
and then if you could guide me and give me a few answers.
We will do what we can.
Thank you. Let's look at it from maybe a typical earthly response to a negative situation, or a situation that might be perceived as negative.
Yes.
Now, I understand the idea that we create our reality.
Yes.
We're aware of what we create.
Yes.
But in some negative situations, it seems
In
as
some
though,
situations, you label as negative.
okay, the creation, the response,
Yes.
2 different words, is so automatic
Yes.
that we are basically unaware of it.
Yes.
All right, now, let's say that we're faced with a difficult situation.
All right.
We have a negative response.
Yes.
That is the illusion of power.
Yes.
All right, now, let's say like we want to make that bridge and we want to label that and see that as the power of illusion.
Yes.
What's a good way to do that?
Well, thank you. Very simple. First of all, recognize that you have a moment right there in terms of noticing your reaction, where you can stop and pause. You have to get into the habit of pausing when you notice what your reaction is, so that you can give yourself space in which to investigate what's actually going on and what mechanism you are using. That's number 1. You have to get into the habit of giving yourself a moment of pause. You follow me?
Yes, I do.
So, when you recognize that you have had a certain kind of reaction and you don't necessarily prefer that feeling, that energy, that vibration, that emotion, then give yourself a moment of pause, and in that moment of pause, ask this question. What would I have to believe is true for me to react to the situation the way I did? Because it all comes from definition and belief. You understand that? So when you give yourself a moment of pause and you start investigating the idea of what kind of definition of the situation would you have to be buying into in order to supply the situation with a negative meaning, then you will begin to understand why you got a negative effect from it. For once you get into the understanding of the definition that you have attached to the situation, then you can go another step deeper and get into the concept of understanding the motivation behind attaching that definition to the situation. Now, there is only, really, one motivational concept that exists for everything you do in life. Everything. Everything. Oh, wait, everything. And that is this. This is your only motivation. You will always choose in the direction of what you believe is more pleasurable and move away from the direction you believe is more painful. Keyword, what you believe is more pleasurable. What you believe is more painful. That is always your motivation for the choices that you make in terms of how you react or respond to something, or what you choose to do behaviorally. So when you understand that you have a definition attached to a situation that makes you see it as if that response, no matter how much you may say you don't prefer it, but if you actually did respond that way, then what it's telling you is that you have a belief that is fulfilling your motivational definition, that for some reason responding that way or reacting that way is actually more beneficial for you than responding some other way.
I understand that,
Yes.
that thought. Sometimes in some situations it's so built in that the
Yes.
the negativity is so
Yes.
imminent and pervading.
Yes.
Sure, you can take that momentary pause
Yes.
that you're referring to,
Yes.
but you may not have any idea.
Well, this is a matter of training. It's a matter of practice, just like anything. Because you have to also start by redefining the very things themselves that you are talking about in terms of an automatic mechanism. So you have to disassemble the mechanism and examine it for what it is. You're talking about the idea that, yes, we understand on your planet that when you do something like that, it's so ingrained and so automatic, you don't even know you're doing it. You think the meaning comes with that thing because you so automatically steeped it with that meaning, you don't even remember that you did so. So you have to look at the mechanism itself, disassemble it, and start redefining the components of the mechanism itself. And that's why we talk about the idea of definition being so powerful, because not only can you use that to get in touch with the belief, but you can use it to actually dissect the mechanism itself by which you are generating that response. So in other words, redefining words such as habit, as we have done, will in and of itself start to get you to understand that there is a different way to relate to that concept. Because on your planet very often, people will say, well, as you have just said, it's a habit. I can't help it. But the idea is that in our definition of habit, it's something you do that you don't know you're doing. But once you know you did it, it's not a habit anymore. It has been brought into the light. If you saw you did it, then it's not a habit at that moment. Identification, contrary to what many people on your planet believe, identification of a habit is not the beginning of the process of ending the habit, it's the end of the process of ending the habit. Once you can identify it as a habit, you don't have it anymore. If you then keep doing the same thing, it's not a habit, it's a choice. And if it's a choice, then that means there's a definition there that makes it seem like the logical choice. And that's when you can start diving down into the idea of how you are viewing it to look like that choice is more beneficial than some other choice you think should be more beneficial, but you're not choosing. Make sense?
Absolutely.
So dissecting the mechanism itself with the very same tools will also help get you into a new habit of automatically responding in a positive way as opposed to automatically reacting in a negative way. Once you understand what a habit is. Once you redefine that mechanism itself, you can begin to take it apart and use it very differently. Similarly, the concept that you call on your planet trust, because we hear people many times on your planet talking about the idea that, oh, well, you know, it's hard to trust all the time in something. I always am going to have some kind of doubt. Well, yes, in a sense, that may be true. But again, you see, you're just getting caught up in the fact that you have definitions for these things that don't work for you. So the idea is to find definitions that do. And so when we talk about the idea of trust and doubt, we define them this way. There is no such thing as a lack of trust. You are never, ever, 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 ever not trusting something to be true, because if that were true, you wouldn't have an experiential reality. So the issue is that doubt is not a lack of trust. Having doubt doesn't mean you have to learn to trust. You already trust perfectly. It's built in. Trust is the mechanism. You trust in something. The question is, what are you trusting in? So doubt is not a lack of trust. Doubt is a 100% trust in a belief that doesn't work for you. That's all it is. It's an issue of what you trust in, not do you trust. So when you start redefining those mechanisms that way, you will start getting into the habit of catching yourself. And you will start using the idea of redefinition on everything. I'm not saying you have to walk on eggshells and not live your life and not catch every little word and so on and so forth. But the idea is you will start to really pay attention to what it is that's coming out of your mouth, what kind of energy is coming off of you. You will actually stretch the experience out temporally in that sense, so you will catch yourself more in the act rather than it being so automatic you can't stop it.
That's good.
You will actually start seeing it. You'll know, you'll feel it coming, and you'll go, wait a minute, back up. And you'll start catching it before it comes out of your mouth, before you react. You know what I'm saying?
That's very helpful.
All right, thank you.
And Bashar, you thoroughly answered my question.
Thank you.
Thank you very
For
much.
thoroughly asking it. Any other clarifications required before we continue?
Oh, yes.
All right.
About 3 years ago, I became aware of an abduction that I had when I was a child.
All right.
The Greys, I believe. And
Yes.
about 3 months ago, I actually created a connection to this being
Yes.
who I am a part of, or some part of me is a part of them.
Yes.
And
Well put.
I saw that they were kind of having trouble integrating my emotional
Yes.
beingness.
Many of them do.
Yeah, and so I was sending energy
Yes.
up and love and compassion.
Yes.
And I just have a feeling that this bond created is going to be what people are doing in the future
Yes.
to bring. Is this a hybrid that I'm connected to, or?
Well, you are connected to hybrids, but that particular being was a type of gray. That you are giving an opportunity to begin to learn to integrate the energy that you call emotion in your society that they do not relate to in theirs.
Okay.
But you are giving them an opportunity to find a way to translate it into terminology they can understand so that they can deal with you, in that sense, more compassionately as well. But you must understand, it is like learning a new language. You do each speak a completely different emotional language, vibrational, energetic language. And that's why it has taken some time for you to find some common ground, some common language, wherein you can have more equal interactions and not feel so put upon. You follow me?
Yes.
Does that help you?
Yes. And recently I've felt a part of that being almost coming into me.
Yes.
Is it?
Well, understand again, first of all, this. Now, when we say gray, we understand that that is an overall terminology that lumps together many different kinds of beings, many different factions of beings you would label as gray. They are not all connected. But in terms of what you are referring to as an abduction experience, for the most part, the core of those beings that are called grays, first of all, are not actually, in your literal sense of the word, alien. The Greys are from a parallel human reality, and they were human once. They destroyed their world and mutated into what you now recognize as the Grey. They found that in that mutation, in order to survive, they also sacrificed certain things, such as emotionality and the ability to reproduce their species. They recognized that in order for them to continue in any way, shape, or form as a society, they would have to create a hybrid species that had some of their genetic material, but also they required original human DNA, which no longer existed in their reality. So they came into yours to get what they needed. Because you were still human, and even though you were on a similar path toward the possibility of self-destruction, they recognized you had not chosen that yet. And so they felt it was viable for them to use your genetic material to create the hybrid species that would allow their race to perpetuate. Now, in that interaction has come the seeds of the possibility that you will not follow the same path that they followed. You follow?
Yes.
So the idea is that you can recognize that you are helping them, they are helping you. And just because they don't understand exactly how to interact with you politely doesn't really mean that they are in any way, shape, or form being mean or vindictive or evil. They simply have a completely different understanding of their agenda because they're incapable of seeing it from your point of view any longer, because they are no longer human in the way that you understand humanity to be. But in gleaning from you the genetic material to infuse along with theirs in the creation of a hybrid species, one offshoot of which is my civilization, they have reintroduced the concept of the compassion and the humanity into their species. And thus then we, recognizing that we could be of assistance in this entire transition and this program and this agenda, are speaking to all of you to help you through this process and let you know that it actually will result in something positive for all concerned. You follow?
Yes, I feel that.
Then in that sense, recognize that when you recognize yourself as them and they say to you, you are us, what they not only mean is that they are a parallel human species very much like you, but in many cases, many of you actually incarnationally have lives in their race and are dealing with your own counterparts in this race and vice versa.
Oh, wow.
Because again, remember, the oversoul can have multiple simultaneous lives in a variety of dimensions at the same time. So many of you are literally dealing with your counterpart selves in those other civilizations, such as the Greys. And you're learning how to blend those two things, even within yourselves, energetically, as well as the symbol of actually blending them genetically. You see?
Yes.
Does this help?
Can we meet physical to physical being?
With the Grey or with us?
With the Grey.
There are times, of course, when you do meet physically, as in the abduction. It's just that you don't always remember.
Oh, right.
But the thing of it is their vibration and your vibration are somewhat on the same level, even though they may be more technologically advanced. That is why you can meet. You will meet us eventually and other civilizations eventually when your vibration is more compatible with our own. You follow?
Yes.
Does that help?
Yes. So maybe after 2012 I could meet this Grey that I'm associated
More
with?
likely after 2015.
Okay.
Maybe between 2015 and 2017 as we read your energy now. Do remember, as we have said, there's no such thing as a prediction of the future because there is no future.
Right.
There is only a sensing of the energy that exists at the time the prediction is made, and if it doesn't change, then that will come into manifestation. But if it does change, it won't. As we read your energy now, it seems most likely that you will have conscious recognition of a physical encounter with a Grey sometime between 2015 and 2017. Most likely. All right?
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May we now move forward? One more clarification. All right.
Hi, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
Thank you for this interaction.
And you as well.
We were given a sheet of paper, and
Yes.
on it has, in history, it has under negative beings,
Yes.
the Orions, the Greys, and it says para-humans.
Parallel reality humans that I have just
So
described
you've
to
just
you.
discussed it.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So regarding that, with the Greys being...
And the idea is not so much that they are negative, but the circumstances that created them were created out of negativity. You understand?
Yes, I do. The parallel humans, were they on a parallel Earth?
Yes.
Or okay. And so when that planet got destroyed, it vectored into another dimension, solar system? What?
Well, when I say destroyed, I don't mean the entire planet was obliterated.
No, I know.
What we mean is they destroyed the ecological system of the planet to the point where they needed to mutate themselves to survive on it.
Right.
Eventually, their technology also allowed them to go to other planets, and they use spacecraft in that way, which is why you actually think of them as extraterrestrial. And technically speaking, they are extraterrestrial because they come from other planets now, but they are not alien in the same way that you typically think of that idea.
Right, so it was a parallel Earth.
Parallel Earth, yes.
Then what was the planet that had the two suns, the green sun and the orange sun?
Well, in that way, it is one of the other systems that they occupy.
Oh, okay.
Because now they don't consider Earth to be their home world anymore because they cannot survive on it.
But the surface of that one was pretty much destroyed
Yes.
too.
But the idea is that they needed to adapt slowly to different worlds. And so they had to go to one that they were physically suited for before they could actually again go to another and another and another and another and another that is more and more and more and more and more like the original Earth, which eventually also means they become more and more and more hybridized, which eventually leads to my world and other hybrid worlds like Ethasani, which is more Earth-like, and now there are only hybrids and no grays in my time frame.
Okay.
All the grays in that sense have been genetically weeded out, and there are only hybrids in my future, in that sense, reality.
Okay.
You follow?
I do.
Does that help?
That does. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now then, looking at the charts you have been given with respect to the reality generation circuit, we have, of course, explained many times the idea of how you create reality through the prism of your personality. But this is a little bit more in depth so that you can really follow the circuitry of energy and understand that as we describe this reality generation circuit is what is overlaid on top of the soul blueprint. So you bring through the crystallization of the soul blueprint, and in that crystallization process, you create the personality construct, which is represented by the triangles in the center of the reality generation circuit, and which is explained even in more detail on the sheet that just shows the two triangles by themselves. So that central triangle is the same triangle as on the other sheet that is represented by the balanced and imbalanced state. Is that clear to everyone? Yes. All right. So the idea is that this reality generation matrix, if you will, of energy, this configuration, vibration, this signature, template of energy is in a sense superimposed over the soul blueprint and allows the soul blueprint energy to filter through this personality matrix into the reality generation circuit. So the idea is that it comes up through, the soul blueprint is translated through the prism, which is, as we said, the idea of the beliefs and definitions, the thoughts and emotions, and the behaviors, the actions that you put out into the world. And this forms the three-sided prism of your personality. This then, in receiving from source your basic energy of existence, and from source the idea of your blueprint, your soul blueprint, you then put out this vibration in whatever combination the beliefs, emotions, thoughts, behaviors all work together in through the prism. Put that out as a vibrational energy, a projection, so to speak. That projection bounces off the mirror of all that is, which is the outer circle, and is reflected back to you. And thus then into the personality, a translation is made, an experience is created of that reflection, and that experience is given back to the source to add to the overall knowledge of all that is, the overall experience of all that is, and what is possible within all that is. But that experience then is fed back in, reinforcing the personality prism, which then creates another projection, which then gets another reflection, reinforcing that which was projected, which then creates another experience, which reinforces the personality, which goes back to source, which comes back to reinforce the personality again. So you see, it is this cyclic idea that once you establish what your personality is in terms of beliefs, emotions, and behaviors, that is constantly reinforced over and over and over again. And unless you yourself can get to the center of that prism by balancing the beliefs, the emotions, and the behaviors, it is difficult then, and has been difficult for you to tap into the fact, more directly back into the soul blueprint, to remember that this personality is not really who you are fundamentally, and that you always have a choice to short circuit that generation mechanism and start again with a new belief, a new idea, a new emotion, a new behavior, and create a new cycle in the reality generation circuit. Now, the reason it exists this way, and the reason it is so reinforcing in this way, is because if it were not built that way, if it were not structured that way, then you would not be able to experience fully any given belief. This is a deeper explanation of what we have said before when we talk about the fact that any particular definition or belief is always going to contain a self-reinforcing mechanism in order for you to understand that you have to have a full experience of that belief to the apparent exclusion of all other beliefs. And that's why sometimes you find it difficult to change your beliefs, because of this generational mechanism that reinforces whatever belief you originally focused on as being true. But now that we can illuminate the reality generation mechanism itself, and you can start to really see it in your mind as a circuit path, you can begin to also include the ability to short circuit that anytime you want by grounding yourself straight from the center of your personality prism right back down to the soul blueprint level, short circuit the effect, short circuit the belief, and come back up to the surface with a pause, a neutral state, and say, all right, wait a minute. Let's reinvent from the ground up. Let's take from the soul blueprint level where I know my themes and I know myself, and let's reconstruct the personality prism and bring it back into balance with belief, emotion, and behavior, and let a new generational energy follow that circuit and get reinforced rather than the one that no longer served me, rather than the one that was perhaps a little bit out of alignment with my fundamental soul blueprint, my basic self, my natural self, my fundamental true self. Because in the earth reality experience and in physical reality in general, because physical reality can only be experienced in a linear space-time framework, that's the definition of physical reality, linear space-time framework, because you have created an experience that involves space and time, this is why when you create the soul blueprint and then the personality overlay, time and space can actually cause these things to drift out of alignment over time. You follow me? In other words, the very idea that you have included the concept of space and time into the equation of your experience of life actually creates in the equation of your experience the possibility, the ability for you to get out of alignment with yourself. You see, on higher levels, there's no possibility of getting out of alignment with your true self, because we are not involved in the idea of as much space and time. But when you steep yourself deeply in a space-time matrix, then the very idea that you're dealing with space and time can actually become part of the equation to such a degree that it can actually have an effect on your ability to stay aligned with your true self. Because if there is space, you can get out of alignment over time. You see? So the idea is to make these circuitries in that sense that were invisible now visible to you, so that you can understand the equation you are creating, the circuitry you have been working with, so that you can understand why it has gotten out of alignment over time, and allow yourself, now that you know what equations you are working with, to bring it back into alignment. In other words, this is just teaching you how to use the actual structure of the reality you find yourselves in. You follow me? Anyone not clear about this idea? All right.
Would you just give an example of the projection reflection experience, that circuit with a concrete example that we might follow along with?
Well, projection and reflection really are nothing more than the idea that what you put out is what you get back. In other words, what you believe most strongly to be true is what you actually see reflected to you in your physical reality. Does that make sense? Yes? Yes? That's what I mean by projection reflection. Now, it isn't always necessarily a one-to-one reflection in the sense of, well, if I see someone come into my life who is a very mean and vindictive person, that doesn't mean I am a mean, vindictive person, that I'm putting out mean, vindictive vibrations in order to attract a mean, vindictive person. It can mean that, but what it usually means is that the idea of what you put out creates the possibility, creates the probability, creates the space and the atmosphere into which such a person might come, so that you can get out of that interaction whatever it is you need to get out of it for your own purposes, for the exploration of your own theme. So it is still an issue of having projected and then gotten a reflection, but you have to determine what the reflection means for you. In other words, you have to put the meaning into the reflection that you prefer to have in order for you to get out of it what you prefer to get out of it. Does that make sense? But the kind of reflection you get is the kind that you needed to attract in order to give you the proper opportunity to do what you need to do with it. Make sense?
Or else it can go out of alignment.
Or else it can go out of alignment. And the idea is that misalignment itself is the product of the fact that you are dealing with a delay factor, that you're dealing with a time-space delay factor between the projection and the reflection. So that you don't know you've attracted it in that sense because it seems to be coming to you autonomously. And you don't necessarily feel, in that sense, the idea that you yourself are out of alignment with your fundamental self because you don't remember it, because it's been so long since you felt connected to it. So space and time actually play a part in the equation of your inability often to see what is transparently before you in terms of what you're creating, because that factor itself places time and distance between the initiation and the manifestation. Does that make sense? Now, on one hand, the idea is that it is actually fundamentally very quick, very automatic. Obviously, if it were not, there would be gaps in your reality experience. Because in that sense, obviously, as soon as you put out, you do instantly get back. But what I am talking about, the delay factor is in your ability to recognize that that's what's happening. Because you are creating so many requirements of plugging in and so many requirements of needing an association. In other words, the mechanism is so overlaid by space-time equations that it is invisible to you and you can't understand your connection to it. You've buried the mechanism in a space-time matrix, and so you don't see the direct connection between you and the manifestation, even though it's happening instantaneously. You don't see it because your perceptual ability is slowed down by space-time. Not that the manifestation is slowed down, your perceptual ability of your relationship to the manifestation is slowed down. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yes.
Anyone still not clear about this? Yes?
The other part of it, the experience and the creation, how does that fit in?
How does it fit in?
Yes.
In what sense?
Well, you said there was a whole loop,
Yes.
and I'm not seeing how it all fits.
How it all fits with what?
Well, you explained the projection and reflection.
Yes.
Could you tie that into the experience, to source, and from source creation? How does creation?
Well, first of all, of course, you are created by source, yes?
Yes.
All right. That gives you your existence, yes? Within existence, you create the idea of your relationship to existence, yes? How you create your relationship to existence determines the experience of existence you have, yes? Are you sure? Are you with me?
My head's been a little spinning.
Oh, all right. How you create, how you define your relationship to existence creates your experience of existence. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So your experience is directly related to how you define your relationship to existence. That's another way of saying that. Yes?
Yes.
All right. So once you have then the experience is then reflected back to source to add to source's perception of itself and what it is capable of providing as experiences to all of the pieces source has created itself to be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's the loop. Does that make sense then? Does that clarify what you were asking? You're sure?
Yeah, I was going to add one more thing.
Yes.
When you want to kind of reground yourself, you're saying go back to your blueprint. Why not just go right back to source?
You could, and that's fine. And perhaps that might actually be one of the better ways to do that. But eventually, in order to actually have an experience, you will have to come back from source through the blueprint anyway. So in a sense, that's what we mean by going back to the blueprint. Yes, you can connect all the way back to source, but you have to come back through the blueprint to reconnect to your personality construct in order to have another experience. Does that make sense? Yes. Does that help? Yes. Thank you.
If there are,
yes?
If there are any other questions, please come up to the front and talk into the mic so you can hear it on the CDs afterwards. Thanks.
Are there any other clarification questions at this point? Yes. All right, come up to your microphone. Would it not be a macrophone? I see. All right.
Hi, Bashar.
And to you, good day.
I was interested to know, with regard to the genetic manipulation, how that relates to our DNA and the concept of 12 strands versus 2-stranded DNA.
All right. All 12-strand concepts are not capable of being experienced in physical reality. The most that you can experience in physical reality of any kind is 3 strands of DNA. The other are, in that sense, connected to higher dimensional planes that will be non-physicalized, but still nevertheless carry the energetic imprint that will translate down into physical reality in whatever way, shape, or form it needs to through the 3 or 2 strands that are available physically for that translation to occur in. Does that make sense?
Yes. So
the other strands, as you call them, are energy strands that are in higher levels, higher planes of existence that are connected to and relate to the idea to some degree of soul blueprint levels. Yes. In that sense, the soul blueprint could be said to be a type of genetic material, but it's non-physical. So the concept of the 12 strands of DNA, or shall we say the idea of the 9 above physical reality, is that the 9 are embedded in the soul blueprint, but they're non-physically embedded. But they nevertheless affect the 2 or 3 that are capable of being experienced in physical reality to act as a conduit to bring those energies through. Does that make sense?
Oh, it definitely does. So I have heard in Palladian transmissions the idea that when we were genetically manipulated, that we were disconnected from our 12 down to 2, so that our capacities had been minimalized, and that this process of awakening was about this return. Is that different than?
In some senses, this is so. A variety of events are responsible for the idea of the experience of the disconnection. But yes, the idea now is that as you are reconnecting to the concept in awareness of your soul blueprint, you are reconnecting to the other strands of DNA that are non-physical, yes.
So, but with a notion of somehow we were damaged, that we...
You are not damaged. You are not damaged. You were not slaves. Nevertheless, the idea of the introduction of extraterrestrial DNA into the hominid species that created humans did contain switching mechanisms. But the switching mechanisms, in that sense, unbeknownst to the extraterrestrials who created that blending, actually had other ways of turning on than the extraterrestrials even understood. And they actually did turn on by themselves. Now, in and around Atlantean times, however, humans themselves, when they explored the idea of polarity to such extreme degrees, then began turning some of them off themselves. You follow me? So in that sense, it's not that they did that, it's that you did. Nevertheless, what you were attempting to do was mimic what you thought they were all about. In other words, you were attempting to make yourselves, as you thought of them, as gods. And in so doing, by not yet being prepared to understand what that all meant in a blended and balanced way, and in some senses actually mimicking some of the things they had done, because understand, they were not all that completely balanced, then you actually recreated something that they had already created in their society that also allowed you to go astray. Mm-hmm. You thought you were copying perfection, and all the imperfections came with it. You follow?
Yes, yes.
So, now you're waking up to the fact that it's not about revering anyone in that sense as a god. It's about connecting to your own godhood in a balanced and blended way. and making it your own, and not attempting to imitate anyone, not attempting to imitate us, but making it your own unique expression of your connection to all that is. Does that make sense?
Yes, excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now then, in this idea of the reality generation circuit, let's have a small meditation to lock this in, anchor this in as it connects and relates to the idea of the soul blueprint. Become comfortable as you believe it is possible to become. And remember, during this meditation, you do not need to exclude anything, any sound, any feeling, any sight, any smell. Include everything as part of it. It all belongs, otherwise it wouldn't be. Invite everything in, leave nothing out. Let its energy add to the energy that drives you deeper and deeper and deeper into the meditation and into an understanding of what is being delivered here today. View, if you will, infinite and empty black space. Endless, endless, endless black space. No stars, no light. You are floating in emptiness. And it isn't even you in terms of your body, just your awareness. Everywhere your awareness turns, everywhere your awareness looks, empty, empty, empty black. Until you spot within yourself one bright spark of light. Like a tiny, tiny, tiny star floating in the infinite blackness. Just one. Just the one that you are in the center of your consciousness. Even though it is in the center of yourself, you can still see it as if it were in some senses outside you. As if you were looking in on yourself. Yet it is in the center of yourself. This is your first relationship and connection to Source and all that is. And from this, the light expands and expands and expands and expands until it fills all of the space with whiteness, bright light, beautiful light. Until there is nothing but the light, and you are in the center of it. And then, in that center, a small spot of dark, like a little black hole. In the center of all the infinite light, a small black speck floating in the center of your being. And you know that if you look into that speck, you will see the infinite darkness that you experienced a moment ago. But you know that if you look into that infinite darkness at the very center, you will also see another spark of light. And if you look into that, you will see infinite lightness that you are experiencing now. But you know at the center of that will also be a speck of dark. On and on and on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever without end will always be the darkness and the lightness and the dark. One feeding into another, one expanding from the other, one giving birth to the other, and without the other, neither exists. For you cannot know one without that you know the other. For without the other, there is not the knowledge that another exists. So to have one, you must have the two. Dark and light, light and dark, extend from one and the same creation. They are source. They are all that is. All that is. This light and dark, one unto the other forever, thus then creates patterns within itself. Patterns within patterns within patterns of darkness and light, lightness and dark, patterns and patterns and patterns, filling itself infinitely with patterns of light and dark in a variety of shapes, sizes, configurations, extents, distances, times. Light and dark, vibration upon vibration upon vibration, like ripples in a pond, overlapping, 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 until there is nothing but small vibrations everywhere of light and dark. And out of this sea of seething back and forth polarization energy, certain facets start to crystallize and become self-aware reflective consciousnesses, miniature versions of all that is, infinite unto themselves and yet finite compared to the infinite. Again, infinity containing finiteness and the concept of finiteness extending to infinity. More and more crystallizations until the entirety is crystallized, but full of small crystallizations, autonomous unto themselves. Each of these crystallizations is made up of a signature of many vibrations. It is a soul blueprint, each unique, different, and each looking into the center of itself creates a window, a prism, a triangle, a tetrahedron in its very center of space, time. 3 positions of space, 1 of time, the tetrahedron, 4th dimensional structure, through which, like an eye, it peers into an unbelievable experience of the reality of all that is in 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, and projects itself through that window, creates a personality construct to hold itself, contain itself, identify itself as a vehicle for traveling in that type of space, in that type of reality. Each personality being like unto its own time-space ship, in which the consciousness can project, in which the consciousness can ride and experience that reality, much like a diving bell experiences the deep blue sea. That personality construct is created from the definition of it, the feeling of it, the behavior of it. And thus then, the quality of those things determine the quality of the view you get through the windows in each of those sides. The more clear and balanced the definitions and beliefs, the more clear and balanced the emotions and thoughts, the more clear and balanced and in alignment the behaviors. The clearer the view, the more transparent the view of the reality you are exploring in space-time. And then you encounter a whirlpool, a current, an eddy, a seismic event, a ripple, a tidal wave, something that throws you off course. And you go spinning off into the depths of the dark, dark ocean, all the way down to the blackness, all the way down, until you come to rest on the cold, hard ocean floor of physical reality. And you lie there for a moment, stunned, beset upon by great pressure of the water and energy above you, holding you down, holding you down, holding you down. And you do your best to move, and all you can do is crawl along the ocean floor with the great pressure on your back. And you vaguely remember what it was like to swim free, what it was like to move up or down, left or right, forward and back, what it was like to see the light high above you as you crawl through the sediment of ages past, through the history of the rocks and the beginning of time. And you crawl, and you crawl, and you crawl in the darkness for a long, long time. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to realize that you are crawling up a slightly inclined slope, slightly upward, so slight you almost didn't recognize, because it is still so dark that there is no relative way to tell, but you can feel the difference in angle. The angle is different. Your head is once more slightly elevated, slightly pointed back up. You still cannot see the light, but you know it's up there somewhere. And so you keep crawling and keep crawling, upward, upward, upward. And the slope is long and shallow, and it seems to be taking forever and ever, and there still is no light. No light. No light. And as you keep crawling and keep crawling and keep crawling, suddenly your eyes adjust and you realize it's not quite so dark anymore. It is now shades of gray. And you allow the gray in to feed you information, to remind you of the brilliance of the light, even though this is a pale comparison. It reminds you and feeds you and inspires you and spurs you to keep going, to keep climbing, to keep climbing, to keep climbing. And the slope bends upward, more abruptly, more abruptly, more abruptly. And you begin to feel some of the weight being lifted, the pressure, the load lightening up. And a little more light leaks through, and a little more light leaks through, and now you can see you are not alone. There are others all around you crawling up the slope with you. And you realize you were never really alone. But just so in the dark you could not see that you had company. And upward you go, and upward you go, and upward you go. And pretty soon it's lighter and brighter and lighter and brighter, and now you're not crawling anymore. You're starting to swim a little bit. You still sink down a little bit to the slope, but you can push off and float for a while. Push off and float up. Push off and float up and up and up and up. Until your feet are only barely touching the slope, and you are starting to stand, and your head is high. And now you can see others around you, not only of your own kind, but all sorts of life, floating up with you, inviting you higher, higher. And there is beautiful, beautiful light and music coming from the surface, above the surface. And you float up and up and up, no longer caring what the slope of the floor is, for now you are free of it. And you float upward and upward and upward, and now the light is getting bright and brighter and brighter, and so bright you almost have to squint. But soon you get used to it. It is shimmering, iridescent, sparkling, beautiful, alluring, inviting. And in one breathtaking splash, you break the surface and can see the infinite expanse of the ocean all around you, and all the others bobbing up and down in the sea, looking around, blinking their eyes awake, moving from one density to another, their heads poking up into the air, breathing the air again, the cool, fresh air, filling your lungs, invigorating, inspiring, energizing you. And to the point where you begin to rise higher and higher and higher in the ocean, until you actually rise above the water, floating above the water, rising into the sky, higher and higher and higher. into the clouds, through the clouds, above the clouds. And you look down below you and see the beautiful blue ocean and the swirling white clouds. And you rise higher and higher and higher and look toward the sun, the bright star of your solar system, and move toward it. But all around you now is blackness and other stars. You are in space. And you look down upon your beautiful globe, your beautiful earth. And you remember the long path. You remember diving down, wanting to play, wanting to explore, wanting to investigate. And you remember the unexpected eddy, the unexpected current, the unexpected whirlpool that drug you down to the ocean floor. And you remember being down there for a long, long time. But then you remember crawling, and then you remember walking, and then you remember climbing, and then you remember rising, and then you remember being back up here above the clouds, back up in space, moving toward the sun as it gets brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter, and moving into the sun, into the heart of the light, the bright, fiery light, into the heart of creation. And the light is bright, but it does not burn. It supports and sustains, and it is what you are made of. And you look back from the sun, from the light of all that is, to the earth, and you remember it as a journey, as a treasured path, as an experience never to be forgotten and always to be cherished. And you are now of the stars. You are the stars themselves that give birth and life to the various planets upon which many such journeys are possible. And you marvel at the myriad possibilities within creation, the infinite number of journeys that have been taken by a variety of versions of you, simultaneously, side by side, across the gulfs of space, time, and dimensionality, going on multiple journeys, infinite multiple journeys simultaneously, and collecting yourself back into the oversoul that is the star of many systems, that is the light of consciousness of many dimensions, and to the source of all that is. Your oversoul rises with other oversouls, each oversoul containing multiple millions of lifetimes, and each oversoul rising together to blend into the one, the all that is. Each experience fully remembered, fully retained, and yet also simultaneously harmonized, harmonized, harmonized with the one. This is your natural state of being. This is who you are. And the soul blueprint is but a reminder of this connection. It is but an echo of this connection. Yet through it, your personality can always be reminded by listening to the clear tone, the clear chord, the clear ringing of the bell that reminds you that whenever you are having difficulty and doubt, whenever you are in trouble, come home, come home, come home. You can always leave again. And you can always come back. Back and forth. Back and forth, lubricating the path, gliding from the personality to the soul blueprint, to the source, to the soul blueprint, to the personality, to the multiple lives, back to the source, any direction you wish, any way you wish, any when you wish. Take a deep breath in and lock this certainty in. Lock it in. It is who you are. And understand that you are now changed. And that the personality you were, the personality that came to this transmission, is not the personality who will leave this transmission. And this is a different transmission, on a different world, on a different day, in a different place. And that what began is another place and time from where you are now and who you are now. Breathe deep and know the certainty of who you are. Incorporate this vibration in every cell of your being. Take the time you have made. Take the time you are making to express that which is you as fully as you can. Take another deep breath. Open your eyes if they are closed. And connect to a new reality, a bubble reality, that is not the same world that was here before. Not the same person that was here before. Let go, let go, let go. And connect into the new you. One more deep breath with your eyes open. Feeling clear, clean, fresh, and transparent. Would you all enjoy a short break? Then you may take your break and we will resume this transmission shortly. Let it soak in.